Hello, we have another video I wanted to do. I've done one recently on Jesus in India, the lost and missing years. Here's another one on the Eastern Worldview, karma, and natural disasters. As I mentioned in my early videos, had an interest in world religions. Specifically find Hinduism really fascinating. Try to read up on that a bit, but the reason I got into this specific subject was I was on the Cold Case Christianity website and was reading an article titled "Where is God During Natural Disasters?" So I started thinking, well, how does the Eastern worldview address this question? How do they deal with the loss of life, pain, and suffering that may happen from, earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes, and would they even consider things like that evil? Before we jump into that, I want to go through a case study that's related to this topic. I go on Facebook quite a bit, maybe like a number of you, and it's a good place to come across some interesting discussion points, and happened to come across a discussion that was related to karma. So here's a Facebook friend, we'll call her Mary. The names of the people on here have been changed to protect the innocent, so to speak, but we'll call her Mary. She posted this: someone at work today said my car accident was due to bad karma. I don't know if that's true. I can't think of anything I've done that I deserved what happened to me. I must have done something terrible, because this is a pretty harsh and lasting punishment if that's true. So she sounded fairly upset about what happened to her, and of course some of her Facebook friends started posting. One of them said, "What a horrible thing to tell someone. Bad things don't always happen because of karma." Facebook friend 2, "Holy crap, if that's the case, then this year means I'm a terrible person and have horrible karma." So pay attention to some of these comments, because through the course of this presentation, I think a lot of the questions may be answered to if these statements that they're saying are true or not true, and we'll readdress these at the end. Facebook 3, "That's crap. Unfortunately, bad things happen to good people. I bet they believe children get cancer because God is punishing their parents too." Friend number 4, "Ignorance. Don't let people like that get you down. Things happen because they just happen. Life will throw you curveballs. Trust me on that." Facebook friend 5, "I can't stand when people say that. Karma should only be considered good. You do good and good things come to the good." I wonder if that's a true statement. Facebook friend 6, "And by the way, you are a good person." Friend 7, "People who tell other people that kind of bull need some karmic retribution themselves." And Mary posts back, and she's feeling a whole lot better. "Y'all are so awesome. I was pretty floored. I didn't really know what to say, except that I really didn't think it was karma. Then I really wondered if she knew what karma was." Well, we'll see if Mary really knows what karma is, and her friends also. Facebook friend 8, "Don't believe the bull. You know in your heart of heart what the truth is. Let that be your guide." And Facebook friend 9 says, "Bad karma is to have a coworker like that." So Facebook friend 8 said, "You know in your heart of heart what the truth is." So now truth is basically subjective and could really change depending on the person. So we're going to look at some prime sources from Hinduism, Theosophy, and Buddhism. So we're going to start off with Hinduism and karma and see what some of these sources have to say. So the first one we're going to look at is this a book that I was able to download online called The Path to Shiva, a catechism for youth, and you can download this from the Himalaya Academy website. They have some really good resources on their sect of Hinduism. And you can get it in a PDF, and there's some ebook forms, and you can get their Hinduism Today magazine also, which we'll be looking at. But the book was written, it said, to inspire youth to know and follow that venerable way of wisdom embodied in the Shaiva Siddhanta traditions of South India and Sri Lanka. So it's a book that's divided into a number of different areas or doctrines, I guess you can say, that there may be 1 or 2 pages in length. So here's one that was titled, What is Karma? This is number 31. I can't remember exactly how many of these there are, but there was quite a few of them. So it goes on to say that the law that causes an object to fall to earth, we call gravity. And the law that governs the reaction of thoughts, words, and deeds, we call karma. It is an automatic system of divine justice. So remember some of these descriptions as we go through this. An automatic system of divine justice. And by this law, what we sow, we will reap. You'll hear this phrase a number of times also. You are the writer of your own destiny. Karma applies not only to individuals, but to groups, communities, and nations. Remember that as well. So as we can see here, I guess karma is just like a law, just like gravity. No difference. Goes on to say, in the highest sense, there is no good or bad. As Shaivites, we do not see a sharp contrast of good and evil in the world. This is from number 25. What about evil, hell, and sin? Number 24, are souls and world essentially good? It says, since God is everywhere and in all things, there can be no place for evil. So this is a key belief by many people in the whole this Eastern worldview, that God is everywhere and in all things. Evil is often looked upon as a force against God, but we know that all forces are God's forces, even mean and hurtful actions. Yes, bad things do happen, still the wise never blame God, for they know such things are the return of our self-created karmas. Tough lessons that help us learn and mature, and knowing this, remember this as well, the wise accept suffering from any source, be it hurricanes, earthquakes, floods, famine, wars, disease, or personal tragedies. So these natural disasters are basically a result of your self-created karmas, or what you experience from them. So I've tried to read a number of different articles and sources on karma. I find it kind of fascinating to try to understand it. But if you read anything about it, you'll hear it stated as maybe a divine law, a science, something similar. As above, we saw it was an automatic system of divine justice. That's another word to keep in mind. So it's meting out some type of ethical decisions. But then once I started thinking about this, how does this divine system or automatic system of divine justice actually work? And is there a common agreement and understanding as how this law operates? So just some questions that I had, and you may have similar questions. So if karma is an impersonal law, and if it's like gravity, gravity is not personal. So it's an impersonal law like the law of gravity. How can it met out justice? So I'm sure if we think about our justice system, we have a person, a judge, who's the one handing out decisions or justice. It's not left up to some, say, AI robot or something like that. And if justice can be meted out, how is it really just when the vast majority of people have no memory of what they did to cause themselves to be in the painful situation they are experiencing? So as an analogy, it'd be like the police showing up at your house unannounced with a search warrant, arresting you and putting you into jail for the rest of your life and not telling you what you did to deserve your punishment. I think most of us would say, hey, that's unfair, and most likely the first question we would be asking is, what did I do? What did I do? But with this law of karma, you don't know what you did. And another question, how is justice meted out the first time you enter onto the wheel of samsara? What form will you take? Will it be human or something else? What would you have done, for example, to be born a Dalit, untouchable, or an animal? So I tried to search on the internet on this question, but not a whole lot came up. I did find a number of people talk about the individual self, or the Atman, or the soul, and everything I read on that basically said, well, that's eternal, but that wasn't the question. It's when the soul reincarnates into some type of form. What does it come into the first time you jump onto this wheel of samsara, of birth, death, and rebirth? And so I found this quote from a Hindu philosopher, Ramanuja, in this Vedartha Sangraha. I think it's like a commentary on the Vedas. And he said the individual self is subject to beginningless nescience. So kind of goes in hand what I found, that the individual self is beginningless or eternal, which has brought about an accumulation of karma of the nature of both merit and demerit. So there's good and bad karma being brought out by this eternal self, or Atman, that's accumulating karma. And the flood of such karma causes his entry into 4 kinds of bodies: heavenly, human, animal, and plant, beginning with that of Brahma downwards. So Brahma is one of the 3 gods that's related to the Hindu Trimurti, or Trinity, along with Vishnu and Shiva. So I really don't understand what he means by beginning with Brahma. So is this the first time you get incarnated with a body, you're going to come back as Brahma? But how does that work? If Brahma is one of the creator gods, I would think you wouldn't have any karma to get rid of or burn off. So in doing some searching, I came across a video by Swami Tadatmananda where he appears to address this question in a video titled Doctrine of Karma Part 3. And you can look at this on YouTube if you want. Just type in Doctrine of Karma Part 3. He talks about some different types of karma. So I'm not going to play the video. It's fairly long, and most of it isn't really related to this question. But I tried to summarize what he talked about in this video. So he made a couple of statements that I noted as premises, and then he came to a conclusion. You can check this out on the video to see if I'm saying what I'm writing here is true or not. So the first thing he says, that you were born because of your past karma. And this is a basic principle of karma. Well, since I have the video up, let me I'll just scroll and play this first part so you can hear what he says.
Well, we can begin by noting a basic principle of the doctrine of karma. That is, you were born because of your past karma.
So you were born because of your past karma. And he goes on to say that this is a...
To understand this clearly, consider the
And he says this is a basic principle of karma. And so just by the definition of the word born, English definition, it means having come into existence by birth. If you look up a definition, so it's like coming into existence. It makes sense with what he's saying here. You were born because of your past karma. And I think if you're born, he's not talking about the Atman or the eternal self, because that's eternal, that's not born. So this has to be the Atman being born into some type of human form, animal form, going through these number of cycles of birth and death and rebirth. So how you get born is because of your past karma. Okay. Premise 2, he says that, but for your very first birth, how could there be any past karma? Which makes sense. First time you're born, you haven't done anything to accumulate any good or bad negative karma. So he says, for your very first birth, how could there be any past karma? It's impossible. So if you look at the word birth, it's the beginning of something. Again, like coming into existence or beginning. So based on your first birth, you wouldn't have accumulated any past karma. That would be impossible. So his conclusion is, you had no first birth. Therefore, you must have had an infinite number of prior lives or births and an infinite number of karmas. So that's the conclusion. How does that work? He relates this to like the Hindus. He's of the Advaita Vedanta tradition, but they believe in a cyclic universe that's eternal, being created and dissolved and created again an infinite number of times. So he's relating this to your birth, that you've been had a infinite number of births. And so if one believes the above, it really seems they are forced to accept the logical impossibility of an actual infinite for something physical, like birth. You're coming into form of some body, embodiment. Or if they have to believe this logical impossibility, the other option would be to acknowledge the falsity of it, but I think most people won't do that, so they're going to have to try to come up with some really reason that's not very plausible. So you've had an infinite number of prior births. So how does that work? I tried to diagram this. So just say, for example, if this is your first birth here, a man next to this blue karma. So whatever karma you had would tell you what form you come into. You'll live, and then you'll maybe generate some negative karma and create some positive karma, come back. So that karma that you have at that time will tell what form that you're born back in, because remember, that's one of the basic principles of karma. You were born because of your past karma, so that's going to tell what you're going to be born back into down the road, until here you eventually burn off all your positive and negative karma and reach moksha, or enlightenment, so you can jump off of this wheel of samsara. But he's saying you've had an infinite number of past karmas. And you also had an infinite number of prior lives and births. So when did the infinite karmas happen with respect to each infinite birth? So according to the Swami, well, you can't have any karma before your first birth because you couldn't have accumulated any. So these infinite karmas, they occur at the same time of your infinite births each time, or after? How does that work? And if you watch, I think it was a previous video, I guess he basically said that how karma works is a mystery. It's not scientific and it can't be proven, but then he goes on to say, well, you can't disprove it either. But so as we'll go through this presentation, we'll see that really I don't think anybody knows how it works, and how people say it works contradicts somebody else. So just some summary points so far. So if all is God and God is all, then there's no distinction between good and evil. And if you say something is evil, then you're saying God is evil, which a person can't do if they are to be consistent. So this, what I've said up here, is really what was said in the Path to Shiva book. So if God isn't part of the equation, it has to be your own doing and the return of your own negative karma, as we saw in some of the statements above. So let's look at this Garuda Purana. So the Puranas are one of the Hindu scriptures. There's a number of them. You may have heard of the Vedas. They're the oldest Hindu scriptures, called Shruti, if I remember correctly, that have been given down by the ancient rishis, that which is heard. And the Puranas are part of the Smriti, which is which has been recorded. So this Garuda Purana is one of 18 major Hindu Puranas, so it's not an insignificant Purana. There's 36 Puranas in all, so it's one of the 18 major ones, and then there's 18 minor Puranas. So many of the chapters in the book are as a dialogue discussion between, as you can see here in the picture, Vishnu and his bird vehicle Garuda. A number of the Hindu deities have some kind of animal vehicle that transports them around from place to place. So here's what's stated in this Garuda Purana. So Vishnu is talking. He says, Garuda, it is most difficult to get human birth among all these births. So this human birth is most sacred of all births. And in that human birth there are Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyakas, and Shudras, these 4 sects of people. So this is pretty key to remember. The human birth is sacred and the most difficult. And so we as humans are at an advantageous stage of our rebirth because we have free will, unlike animals, which operate on instincts. So we can actually generate a lot of good or positive karma and get rid of a lot of the negative karma. And that'll cause us to be able to get off the wheel of samsara quicker and reach moksha, as opposed to just being in the form of an animal. And these 4 sects of people are the groups in the caste system, with the Brahmin priest at the top, followed by the Kshatriyas, which are the warrior, ruler class, the Vaishyas, which are the shopkeepers and merchants, and the Shudras, which are the servants to the above 3 castes. And then there's a group below all of these 4, which are called outcast, or untouchables, or Dalits. And the Garuda Purana also says that among the humans, too, the Brahmin life is still exalted. So even if you're born a human, the best is to come back as a Brahmin, because they're closer to being able to jump off of this wheel of samsara and reach moksha. And among the Brahmin persons, the one who are involved in the studies of Vedas and understanding of the Puranas lead a better life in comparison to ones leading mundane lives, getting bored in day-to-day living and squabbles. And it is a human birth that leads to swarga and getting mukti. So swarga is basically means heaven. And I guess it could also be known as Swarga Loka. There's one of 7 lokas or planes in the Hindu cosmology. It's a heaven where the righteous live in paradise before their next incarnation. And mukti is also another word for moksha. And it just means emancipation, liberation, or release. And it connotes freedom from samsara, which is the cycle of death and rebirth, which is your main goal in Hinduism. And it also goes on to talk about details of the fate of those who commit various sins and earn negative karma. So the Garuda Purana says this, that those who self-indulgent do not worship Shiva, Hari, Sura, Ganesha, these wise and good teachers, these certainly go to hell. Well, I don't worship Shiva, Surya, or Ganesha, so if you believe the Garuda Purana, that this is my fate and other people's fates who don't believe the same way. It says the murderer of a virgin becomes leprous. Who steals a book is born blind, and who steals food becomes a rat. Who steals grain becomes a locust. Wow, so if people are having leprosy throughout the world, they were in their previous lives the murderer of a virgin, according to the Garuda Purana. Or if you know someone who's blind, they stole a book in their previous life. It also goes on to say the pupil who does not serve his teacher becomes an animal, an ass, or a cow. So I think the cows that are walking throughout India must have been pupils in their former lives who did not serve their teachers, according to this. Who hates mother, father, and teacher, who quarrels with sister and brother, is destroyed when an embryo in the womb, even for 1,000 births. So it's not just one birth, but 1,000 births. I don't know if this could be interpreted as abortion, but if it is, then every baby who's been aborted in their previous life had hated their mother, father, teacher, or quarreled with their sister and brother. And that's the reason they're going through that fate or situation. It goes on to say that these and other signs and births, O Lord of birds, or Garuda, are seen to be the karma of the embodied, made by themselves in this world. Thus, the makers of bad karma, having experienced the torches of hell, are born with the residues of their sins in these stated forms, and obtaining for thousands of lives the bodies of animals, they suffer from carrying burdens and other miseries. It appears that people who had committed those sins we talked about, seems like they had already previously had experienced tortures of hell. They're born with these residues, and it sounds like they're going to obtain thousands of lives, the bodies of animals. I'm assuming they obtain those before they're going to come back as humans. And he says, karma which has been made, whether good or evil, must inevitably be suffered. Must inevitably be suffered. Karma not suffered does not fade away even in tens of millions of ages. So you're going to have to suffer it and burn it off. It's not going to go away even in tens of millions of ages. So that's kind of interesting. So how does one actually suffer? You may hear this word fructify, an actual infinite amount of karma to escape samsara and obtain moksha. Because remember, the Swami in his video said that the basic principle of karma is you are born because of your past karma. Well, for your very first birth, how could there have been any past karma? There couldn't, so it's impossible. So you had no first birth, so you've actually must have had an infinite number of prior births and an infinite number of karmas. So how do you actually burn off or suffer through an infinite amount? There's no way you can get through an infinity. Because once you get back one step, you're going to have to go further back and further back all throughout infinity. Unless he's redefining what infinity means. So here's another source that I came across. It's a PDF book that I found online by Sri Swami Shivananda of the Divine Life Society, titled Karmas and Diseases. So he says this, that the diseases we suffer from the births we get here on earth are all products of actions done by us in previous lives. And here are given some of the many pitiable conditions of life which man has to live in due to his careless, sinful deeds. So he lists, there's a table that lists a various number of the headings of karma, what you committed, kind of karma you generated, and that what diseases that leads to, and that's, as he says up here, that's what we're going to suffer from the births we get here on earth, and they're all products of actions done by us, ourselves, in previous lives. So just an example, I won't go through all of these, but who plugs up or blocks up the hole of a rat or a snake, who catches fish and causes them to die by suffocation, who stifles the life of any creature, gets asthma, lung diseases, pleurisy, bronchitis, which will be severe, pneumonia, etc. So if you know somebody's suffering with any of those ailments, this is what this book says that they had done in their previous lives to deserve these diseases they're suffering with. Or who indulges with prostitutes, commits adultery, and leads an impure life, gets leprosy. So that's interesting. So that kind of caused me to look. I found this document by the World Health Organization talks about the global leprosy situation dated 2012. So there's some various tables in here, and this table 1 is the registered prevalence of leprosy, number of new cases detected in 105 countries or territories by the World Health Organization. So as you can see, the number of cases registered in the prevalence first quarter 2012 and the number of new cases detected. But I guess just the key thing to take away here is the largest number by far is in Southeast Asia. Then second is in the Americas. And there's a second table that talks about the trends in the detection of new cases of leprosy. So the number of new cases detected from 2004 to 2011. Again, the largest number we see is in Southeast Asia, followed by the Americas, and then not too far behind is Africa. But you can see, I guess there was a trend going down and it spiked up a little bit in 2011. In Table 3 lists the trends in detection of leprosy in 18 countries reporting greater than or equal to 1,000 new cases during 2011. And number of new cases detected annually since 2004. So the interesting thing to point out here is that the largest number of cases are in India by a huge margin, with the second largest amount looks like it's Brazil, then followed by Indonesia and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. But you can see that India is quite a bit larger than any other country, and that's sort of interesting. I mean, you have to ask the question, well, if that's the case, why are all these people with leprosy being reborn in a large number in India and then in Brazil? I don't know the answer to that. If you believe that this is true and what happens as a result of their karma, I think we know leprosy is caused by bacteria and is, for the most part, preventable if there's adequate knowledge about it and, I guess, treatment. Maybe I'll just read a few others. Cruel doctor. If you were a cruel doctor who ill-treated your patients, gave them worthless medicine, charged high rates, you're going to be born as a woman and have womb disease. And their conceptions and delivery will be attended by severe complication, pain, and will mostly result in abortion. And here's another one that says, if you were a capitalist who extracted forced labor from workers, paid them very low wages in factories, you're going to be born suffering from asthma, great suffocation, a tumor in the brain with unbearable pain. Also become subject to gout, rheumatism, lumbago, and hunchback. Okay, so that's what Swami Shivananda wrote in this book, Karmas and Diseases. So I bought this book called Karma, The Ancient Science of Cause and Effect by Jeffrey Armstrong. Fairly interesting book, and I guess he actually gives more details about how the system of karma actually works. But it's interesting, you can see on the cover of the book he uses this word science when talking about karma. And he says on page 10 that we initiate an action at a certain time in the future, we reap the fruit of our deeds. As you sow, so shall you reap. Here's that phrase again. Karma is the science of our actions and their outcomes. But really nowhere can I find that the assertion that karma is a science is nowhere substantiated in the book. As I mentioned before, Swami Tadatmananda in his video basically said, no, you can't test karma by a science because it's not anything that can be tested by the scientific method. So I'm not sure why people are calling it a science. I think they're only calling it a science to try to lend credibility to the doctrine of karma. Maybe sell more books. And Mr. Armstrong in the book just describes that our existence here on earth is like being in a park. In all the experiences that we go through, we gain very different, we learn different things going through these different experiences. So maybe you can think of it like going to Disney World or Disneyland, and there's a whole bunch of park employees who are there and running the park. So he's gives an analogy of something similar, and he says there are mandatory park rules that need to be followed, and the key players, this is key, in the operation of the park are divine beings or gods called devas or devis. So these are the park employees running the show. So these gods have power over and manage certain departments or forces of nature, analogous to someone being in charge of like the water department, electrical, gas, etc., even forces of nature. So this is key. These devas are crucial to the understanding of karma. Since they are the delivery system for our long-forgotten parcels of karma, everything we do creates a stream of karma packets, letters, and packages without names on them, which is constantly being returned to sender. So another thing about karma, most people, as I mentioned earlier, don't remember what they've done in their previous lives. So these devas are basically handing all of these parcels of karma that you've generated and aren't aware of, and they return them back to sender, return them back to you. So the devas make sure humans are held accountable for their actions by making sure they receive the effects of their karma. And in order for this delivery system to work efficiently, this is also key. The many souls in the park have to be brought together again and again in various situations in order to pay back debts to each other. Let me read that again. The many souls in the park, like you and myself, you and me and everybody else who are living on this earth, in this earth park, have to be brought together again and again in various situations in order to pay back debts to each other. And so the devas sometimes need to control our actions in order to position us next to someone with whom we have owed karma to pay or receive. This is interesting. The devas sometimes need to control our actions. So they're just not controlling behind the scenes like the weather and sending us parcels of karma. They're actually controlling our actions so they can bring us near to somebody that maybe we need to get some karmic retribution from. He goes on to say that all of the inexplicable and unavoidable coincidences, accidents, or enforced circumstances in our lives are the actions of the Devic Air Traffic Control Department. So I hope you get the idea. These devas or gods are the ones managing and operating and orchestrating this whole system and law of karma behind the scenes. So here's a front copy of the April, May, June edition of the 2019 Hinduism Today. And if you haven't read this magazine, I would highly recommend it. It's very well published, probably one of the best published magazines that I've read, in my opinion. A lot of good articles, good information to learn about Hinduism. And so in this issue, they had an article titled Coping with Negative Events. And so actually, you can download past issues of Hinduism Today in PDF or other form. So here's actually the article I'm referring to out of this 2019 edition. Coping with Negative Events is written by the Satguru Bodhinatha Vailan Swami. So coping with negative events, reflecting on how bad things can happen to good people, and offering insights on dealing positively with life's difficulties. So I guess in that article that he writes about, he's responding to some questions he's received from fellow Hindus, correspondents who have written in, and they're asking, basically, these fellow Hindus have not been able to accept recent negative events as something that should have happened to them. So that's what they're struggling with. And in the article, I guess they mention, they're doing these various things that they think they should be doing to build up good karma, but these negative things, bad things are happening to them. And his response is this: the answer I give, karma. Our actions in past lives have created karmic fruit, some of which are to be experienced in this life. Accepting the happenings as self-created allows the disturbance and distraction to gradually fade away. You were destined to have this experience as a fruit of karma. So it's something that's unavoidable. You were destined to have this experience, your own self-created karma. Another key piece of information, not blaming others is the first step. My guru spoke strongly against blaming others. Tell yourself, this is my karma, which I was born to face. We are treated by others as we treated others in the past. So if we swindled money from a business associate in the past, we will someday have that experience, not immediately, but in time. In this way, karma is our teacher. So for example, if you get in a car accident, somebody hits your car, damages it, totals it, what's your reaction going to be if you believe this law and working of karma, and that it's your self-created from your self-created karma? And then you're not to blame someone. Are you going to get their insurance information so they can pay for the damage? You're going to sue them, take them to court? So isn't actually this something you were destined to experience as a fruit of your self-created karma because you damaged, say, someone's car in a past life? That's what this Satguru is saying. And I guess there's another example given in the this article that I thought is interesting. So he gives an example. This is a picture of Swami Shivananda. And there's a man behind him wielding an axe. So he says that the Swami was once attacked and injured by a man wielding a hatchet. Devotees subdued the man and had him arrested. I think that would be the normal inclination. But the following day, Shivananda visited the man in jail, placed a garland around his neck, and thanked him for fulfilling his karmas. He then asked that the assailant be released and bought him a ticket to his home village. So that, according to Satguru, if you believe how karma works, then everybody should be emulating the same actions as Swami Shivananda. So it just kind of brings up a question that people, if you believe this, how many can actually, or maybe first question, how many actually do believe it or can live it out as really it seems that they're supposed to be living it out. And so the Himalaya Academy also came across another document that they published called Karma Management. And again, I mentioned they have a number of excellent resources on Hinduism. But it's provides further insight because it provides 10 principles for effective karma management. Principle number 2 is to accept responsibility. And so in there, it has also another illustration similar to the one like we saw with Swami Shivananda, but it gives an illustration of a lady who is sitting. You can see a man running away from her. And so the lady is recovering from having her purse stolen by the fleeing robber. So she remembers a time when she stole a valuable necklace from another lady's purse and realizes that the karma of that theft has now caught up with her. And it goes on to say, karma generally manifests through other people. You are, through your actions in the past, the creator of all that you experience in the present. Not just some, but all. You caused your loss. The thief is just an instrument for returning your karma to you. And in the end, you have no one to blame but yourself when your life is filled with difficulties. At least that's what this Satguru is saying in maybe this sect of Hinduism. Maybe I should have started off the discussion qualifying it that Hinduism is a vast religion that syncretizes a lot of different beliefs. So I guess one person who's a follower of Hinduism may do and believe something that's not the same or totally different from another person, but I'm trying to look at the various sources to see what they say. So here's a book I came across titled The Science of Karma by a man named Puja Dadashri. So here again we see the word science used in relation to karma, nowhere substantiated. But it's basically an exchange between Mr. Dadashri and somebody who's asking him a number of questions. So the thing to keep in mind here as you listen to this is does what Mr. Dadashri say agree with what Mr. Armstrong said in that first book about how the system of karma works? Is there a contingent of devas managing and orchestrating this karmic delivery system? So the questioner asks Mr. Dadashri, so who manages all this? And he replies, the rules of karma are such that when you create karma, the result will come naturally and automatically. Questioner asks, well, who decides the fruits of karmas we have to experience, and who makes us experience these? Dadashri, they do not need to be decided. The karma itself does this. It happens on its own. The questioner, well, still perplexed, then who governs the rules of karma? Dadashri, when two atoms of hydrogen and one of oxygen come together, we automatically get water. That is the rule of karma. Questioner still doesn't understand, but he says that, but somebody must have made that rule. Dadashri, nobody makes the rules, otherwise there would be a creator. Nobody has to make the rules. This puzzle has come about on its own, governed by the laws of science. This world is run only by scientific, circumstantial evidences. I don't have any idea what that means in relation to this law of karma, but maybe for somebody who wants to believe this, that sounds scientific, and like Mr. Dadashri knows what he's talking about, so they may just believe it without questioning it. He goes on to say that if someone were needed to deliver karma fruits, then he would have to have a gigantic office. But everything runs, here's that word again, scientifically. There's no need for a middleman. What's that? There is no need for a middleman. When the time is up for maturation of karma, it automatically comes into effect. Just like those mangoes that ripen automatically. He goes on to say that everything you encounter is your own design. Nobody else is responsible for it. And he says the responsibility is your own. You are wholly and solely responsible. When a person gets shot, he is suffering the effect of his past life's karma. But karma requires time to come into fruition. For some people, it may take 500 or to even 1,000 years to mature. This is where you may hear this word fructify, this maturation process. So what did you, hope you noticed something, that Mr. Dadashri contradicts what is stated by Mr. Armstrong as to how the whole karmic delivery system works. He says there's no need for a middleman or these devas that are orchestrating things behind the scenes that are bringing people together so they can work out the fruit of their karma, and even actually, as he said earlier, control us as well. But nope, there's no middleman involved. It happens automatically. So I think that brings up an honest question. Well, who is correct and how is any of this scientific? So let's kind of recap what we've gone through so far, that everything you encounter is your own design. You are wholly responsible. In this term you've heard before, what you sow, you will reap. The devas control various forces or departments of nature, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes. The devas control the delivery of your parcels of karma. The devas bring people together in order to pay back karmic debt. The devas don't control the delivery of your parcels of karma. The results of karma will come naturally and automatically, and there's no need for a middleman, i.e. these devas. When a person gets shot, he is suffering the effect of his past life's karma. Knowing such things are the return of our self-created karmas, the wise accept suffering from any source, be it hurricanes, earthquakes, floods, famine, wars, disease, and personal tragedies. You are destined to have this experience as a fruit of karma, your own self-created karma. Not blaming others is the first step. So that's from some number of Hindu sources. Let's see what this Theosophy or Theosophical Society, what do they say about karma? So I found this article from a theosophical website titled "There Is No Injustice." It talks about Madame Blavatsky, who is the founder of Theosophy, and she wrote a book called The Secret Doctrine. That is, it says here that it is only this teaching of the law of karma that will ever satisfy the mind and heart of the intelligent and thinking person who seeks answers to such pertinent questions as why do bad things happen to good people, why do disasters happen, and why do some people suffer. So it's interesting, he said that this law of karma is the only teaching that will satisfy the mind and heart of the intelligent and thinking person. So it sounds like if you don't agree or believe in the law of karma, in answer to these questions, you're really not an intelligent and thinking person, is the inference I get from that paragraph. So at some point, either earlier in the present lifetime or in a preceding lifetime, the person must have behaved in an unpleasant, harmful, negative, or inappropriate way. Here's the statement again we've seen a number of times before. What we reap is what we have sown. And there's no divine being behind this law. So again, it's a law of universal balance, harmony, and equilibrium. It is simply law, uncreated, eternal and immutable or unchangeable. The law inherent in the universe, it just simply is. So I wonder how this law came about. There's no divine being to create it, so it's just always been for eternity. So if we find any people particularly marked out for persecution, interesting statements, we may be sure that as eagles in other times, they had been the offenders and are reaping what they sowed. There is no injustice. What we see as apparent injustice seems so because we do not see the causes which have produced the present ill effects. So again, they're responsible. You don't know what heinous sins that they committed that now they're having to suffer for in this life. Karma is a keynote to all conditions, for it governs the smallest atom as well as the highest spiritual being. It governs men, animals, worlds, and periods of evolution in their individual actions and in their collective interactions. So below this article, there's a number of articles online, an area where you can post a question. So I guess someone read this and had a number of questions, which are good questions, I think. So you ask, how does karma explain the Holocaust and the millions of victims? Were these victims perhaps all former agents of the Inquisition or some other past madness? How about the hundreds of schoolgirls captured by Nigeria's Islamic sect Boko Haram, who have subsequently been subjected to rape, forced marriage, coerced participation in ambushes, as children raped or otherwise abused by their parents, relatives, or family friends living in their presence as they set up for themselves in their past? Of course, I can go on and on. No such thing as innocent victims, he asked. So this is kind of interesting. It brings up the situation with the Catholic priest in the news recently who have been charged and condemned for molesting children over the years. Well, according to how this law of karma works, and if you believe it, then the really children are not innocent victims. They're just being repaid back or suffering because of heinous sins they committed in their past life, this negative karma. So wouldn't people who actually believe this doctrine is true be maybe coming to the aid of the priest? So I guess someone answers and responds to the questions that were asked above, and he says this, or they say this, these awful situations are not due to the karma of the souls involved, then what are they due to? And if karma is an accurate explanation for some things, how can it not be valid for all things. If it only is applicable in some circumstances and not others, it's not a law at all, but rather a peculiar and inexplicably haphazard and unreliable operation within the universe. Can that be likely? But a study of theosophy and careful thought over its doctrines of karma and reincarnation leads one to conclude that these must all be karmic consequences. So even child abuse is a result of karmic consequence. He goes on to say, but in all cases, everything proceeds according to the law of karma, the law of self-created destinies. And so, yes, it is true in one sense that there are no innocent victims. Through past actions and deeds, each soul has indeed fashioned for itself its own experiences and circumstances, whether pleasurable or painful. Their karma caused their pain. So let's look at a couple of Buddhist sites or sources. So here's a website by a Tibetan Buddhist monk named Bhante Dhammika. So I talked about him in a previous video I did on Jesus in India, the lost and missing years. So he wrote an article that talked about that, and I guess he does not believe Jesus went to India, but he had another article I found on his website titled Buddhism and Natural Disasters. So let's see what he has to say. He says there are two types of causation. So there's natural causation and moral causation. So he's making a distinction between these two. So natural causation has nothing to do with people being good or bad. It's simply a matter of the various forces in the universe acting on each other. The Buddhist teaching of karma is only concerned with moral causation. So moral causation is some type of action that's a result of a moral agent like a human being, whereas natural is not based on a moral agent. But he goes on to talk about here. So an example, we'll just look at the recent tsunami in light of this doctrine of karma. Tsunami is an example of an event caused by natural causation. So the tectonic plates on the Earth's surface move, causing an earthquake. Energy is released, creating a huge wave. And if they hit the coast, it causes devastation. So the people in the area where the recent tsunami hit are experiencing two types of suffering. One, suffering caused by natural causation, and suffering caused by moral causation, or i.e. karma, the moral causation. So during the deluge, a person might have been hit by a falling tree, cut by a piece of metal, smashed against a wall. So these would be examples of painful effects of natural causes, and this is key, would have nothing to do with past moral or immoral actions. So according to Buddhism, the physical pain that the victims of the tsunami experience is the outcome of various natural causes. But he goes on to say how they are reacting to these natural causes is their karma. So some uninformed Buddhist might say that the death and injury caused by the tsunami are the result of people's bad past karma. It need hardly be stated here that this is contrary to what the Buddha taught. So this is actually contrary to what the person wrote in the Hindu booklet or document, The Path to Shiva, as well. So here we see a Tibetan Buddhist monk in conflict or contradicting a Hindu guru as far as natural causes. So I put the table together, Hinduism, Buddhism. What we've seen so far, Hinduism said we know all forces are God's. Forces even mean hurtful ones. Bad things do happen. Still, the wise never blame God, for they know that such things are the return of our self-created karmas. Knowing this, the wise accept suffering from any source, be it hurricanes, earthquakes, floods, famine. Whereas what we've just seen from Bhante Dhammika, tsunami is an example of an event caused by natural causation. Natural causation has nothing to do with people being good or bad. Some informed Buddhists might say that the death and injury caused by the tsunami are the results of people's past bad karma or kama. It need hardly be stated here that this is contrary to what the Buddha taught. There's another article I came across. Does karma cause natural disasters? This is also written by from a Buddhist perspective. I think it's also Tibetan Buddhist. So it says that if a person is killed in a natural disaster, does that mean he did something wrong or deserve it? If he had been a better person, would he have escaped? According to most schools of Buddhism, no. Remember, we've said that there is no intelligence directing karma. That's a contradiction between what Mr. Armstrong said about the devas who are directing things. Karma is instead a kind of natural law. Karma does not send natural disasters to punish people. Those standing by judging the victims, saying they must have done something wrong to deserve what happened to them, are not being generous, loving, or wise. Such judgments create bad karma. That's interesting. So if you believe that they do, it's going to create bad karma. So here's kind of like a warning. So take care. So here's an observation. So I believe the Satguru wrote the Path to Shiva booklet. And again, he wrote that the return of our self-created karmas, the wise accept suffering from any source, be it hurricanes, add tsunamis in there, earthquakes, floods. So he appears to be creating a lot of bad karma for himself, since basically he's misleading thousands of people with his false teaching, according to this Tibetan response, Buddhist response. So he goes on to say that it's important to understand that many religious and philosophical schools of Asia have developed many doctrines of karma that disagree with each other. And we have found commentaries by teachers in Tibetan Buddhist traditions that flat out said everything is caused by karma, including natural disasters. We have no doubt they have strong arguments defending this view, but most other schools of Buddhism don't go there. And so I came across a article that was based on a lecture this Professor Emeritus of Buddhist Philosophy, Richard P. Hayes of the University of New Mexico, gave in 2009 at Leiden University in the Netherlands, and it was titled, "Is There Such a Thing as Collective Karma?" And in this lecture, he references an interview frequently with the Tibetan Buddhist monk Lati Rinpoche. So he asked him, what is the most frequently encountered question when you are speaking to Western audiences? And Lati Rinpoche says, well, people want to know why is there so much pain and suffering in the world, and why there are such things, so many bad people. Mr. Hayes replies and says that when I was giving a lecture about Buddhism, a Jewish person in the audience asked me a question to explain during the Second World War in Europe, there were so many innocent Jewish children who had never done anything wrong, according to this Jewish questionnaire, to deserve punishment. They were put to death in Nazi concentration camps or left homeless. So how would you, Lati Rinpoche, answer that question? And he replies by saying that the proper Buddhist answer to such a question is that the victims were experiencing the consequences of their actions performed in previous lives. He says the individuals must have done something bad in earlier lives that led to their being treated in this way. And also there is such a thing as collective karma. It's not just individual karma or individuals reaping the results of their karma. It could be collective karma or a group of people. So Mr. Hayes asked, do you mean that the Jewish people as a whole have a special karma? Lati Rinpoche, yes. All groups have karma that is more than just a collection of the karma of the individuals in the group. Decisions to act may have been made by individuals or by groups. If the decision is made by a group, then the whole group will experience the collective consequences of their decision. Then Professor Hayes goes on to mention a man by the name of Wilhelm Halbfass, who basically stated that this notion of collective karma is not part of the traditional Indian thought, and that it had originated with the Theosophical Society, which was founded in 1875. He also mentioned that it's believed that this Theosophical Society introduced the expression, the law of karma. And he said that in traditional Hindu and Buddhist texts, karma is never referred to as a law in any of the several senses of that English word. But, man, pretty much a large number of things you read about karma will say it's a law. But here, this professor, Emeritus, is saying that in traditional Hindu and Buddhist texts, karma is never referred to as a law in the sense of the English word, anyway. So just a little bit about the Theosophical Society. As mentioned, it was founded in 1875 in New York by a Russian lady named Helena Petrovna Blavatsky and Henry Steele Olcott. So theosophy comes from two Greek words. Theos, you may have heard, theological, meaning God, and Sophia, meaning wisdom. So you're seeking after the wisdom of God. So Miss Blavatsky, he came to the conclusion there is some type of esoteric or hidden knowledge or doctrine behind all the world's faiths, which has been preserved by a succession of masters of wisdom, she called them. Elizabeth Clare Prophet talked about these ascended masters, and what I could determine they're not the same thing, but there's these other masters of wisdom who have gone on before, Miss Blavatsky and others. And she believed she was selected by two of these to reveal these teachings to the world, which she said had been suppressed by the Christian church. She wrote about this in her book, The Secret Doctrine. And from a book I read, it said that Theosophy teaches that all of the major texts of religion possess an outer or exoteric meaning. I guess that's the one that you're most likely come to the conclusion of, and an inner esoteric secret meaning. The task is to discover the hidden meaning of sacred texts. Theosophy is monistic in that it believes that there are many, that the many are an expression of the one. And what I've seen in a number of actually Hindu writings, say by Paramahansa Yogananda, Self-Realization Fellowship, he quotes the Bible a lot, but he reinterprets it according to some type of secret or esoteric meaning that the majority of Orthodox Christians would definitely not come to that conclusion. But so the Theosophical Society aren't the only people doing that. So they believe that God is an impersonal divine source from which all else emanates. So it's similar to Hindu Eastern worldview. And God is latent within all humanity, like our Atman is Brahman. They believe Jesus Christ is divine in the same sense that all people are divine and can become Christ. And the four traditional Gospels are downplayed, and these Gnostic and Apocryphal Gospels are elevated as sources of truth or true knowledge. Another website titled Study Buddhism by a man named Dr. Berzin had an article on collective karma and natural disasters. So it said about Dr. Berzin that he's a Buddhist translator, teacher, scholar, practitioner with more than 50 years of Buddhist experience. Receiving his PhD at Harvard, he spent 29 years in India, training under the guidance of some of the greatest Tibetan masters of our times. Served as occasional interpreter for the 14th Dalai Lama and his tutors. So this article was like a conversation between a person named Jonathan Landau and Dr. Berzin, and he asked Dr. Berzin, so what about those people who are living in the exact place where a violent earthquake strikes, such as in Haiti this past week? Even though it caused widespread devastation, not everyone in the devastated area was injured or killed. So this indicates that those who were seriously harmed had collected the karma, both individual and collective, to experience the harm at that time, while there were those who were relatively unaffected, had not collected such karma. And he replies that, well, some people died and some survived, yes, and those who died had a collective karma to die in the earthquake, so their karma caused the earthquake. or cause them to die in the earthquake, I should say, not just to experience being in the earthquake. Among those who died, some may have had the collective karma shared with several other people to die in the collapse of the same building. So from above, we see Dr. Berzin stating that people died in the Haitian earthquake because of their collective karma and not natural causation. So again, this is different from what was stated by Bhante Dhammika in the other Tibetan Buddhist article. So really, based on what we've seen so far, I can only infer that no one really knows how karma actually works, and their explanations contradict each other. I think if people are honest, they would come to the same conclusion, and I guess that previous Tibetan article made that statement as well. So one way of examining the truth of a worldview is to see if it is consistent based on the various quotes and beliefs we've looked at concerning karma and how it works. There's no consistency on such a key belief, and this is, in my opinion, pardon the pun, key. Karma is a key belief in the Eastern worldviews of Hinduism and Buddhism because it's part of the process that's needed to reach your main goal of moksha. But there is no consistency about how karma works within Hinduism and Buddhism. So I think this is a fair conclusion. As a result, somebody's teaching is false. And they're teaching other people something that's false. They're believing a lie. So what is it? So this brings up the question, another example case, that it's a Denver Post article about the World Trade Center bombings, 9/11. So based on what we've seen about this karmic delivery system, it's said it's been a universal, immutable, or unchangeable, eternal law of karma. There's collective karma that's shared with other people. So we would have to believe that all those tragically killed in the 9/11 World Trade Center attacks were deserving of what happened to them and were either brought together at the same time by these devas who are behind the scenes orchestrating this law of karma. And as it was stated before, I guess they're bringing people together to work out their karma. So this is going to met out justice that was deserved. Or if you don't believe devas are involved, it's just happened naturally and automatically without intervention of the deva. It's the same conclusion, that they were deserving of what happened, and this could be applied to people who die in hurricanes, tornadoes, natural disasters, mad killings, raped, shot. The list can go on and on. So, I mean, this doctrine of karma is predominantly believed by those of an Eastern worldview. I guess like we've seen the Theosophical Society and some other New Age groups also believe it, but I've predominantly studied Hinduism, but those of a Hindu worldview, maybe this may be more of an Advaita Vedanta worldview. And like I said before, Hinduism, their beliefs kind of run the gamut. It's very syncretistic, so this may not be true of every Hindu or Eastern worldview believer, but I think this is a true statement that applies to many. Those of a Hindu worldview believe the soul, or a Jiv Atman, or the eternal self, whatever you want to call it, is eternal. That's what we read from that commentary by Ramanuja. And the Swami Tadatmananda in the video I showed earlier said that the Atman is utterly unaffected by physical and emotional pain, because our essential nature transcends the body. So it goes back to what is our true self. It's not our body, our physical body. We're just ignorant of that. It's really our Atman, or Jiv Atman, this eternal soul within us, that we're just ignorant of the fact that that's really what we are, and that's one and the same, no difference with the ultimate reality or Brahman. So that's why the Swami Tadatmananda can say we should be utterly unaffected by physical and emotional pain, because our essential nature, this Atman, that is Brahman, transcends the body. So you'll eventually be reincarnated maybe hundreds or thousands of times. You'll gain additional experience coming back to this quote-unquote park, to this earth, being reborn until you finally work off all your karma, escape the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. That's the goal or the aim. So really, if you think about it, I mean, if you truly believe this doctrine that our Atman is Brahman, that's our true self, and people are reaping the results of what they've sown, there should be really not a feeling of outrage from these types of events. Or I know Swami Tadatmananda basically says, well, we're human and we'll have emotions, but it seems like you should really have less of an outrage than people who don't believe how the doctrine of karma works and are totally ignorant and clueless of it. They do have a right to be totally outraged. And so Swami Tadatmananda, I'm listening to a series of teachings he's giving on the basics of Vedanta. Very informative. And so he gives an analogy of something he calls movie theater sadness. So that really says this, so that if you can enjoy movie theater sadness, it should be possible to be okay with real life pain and real life sadness. But the only way that can come is if you discover what you knew in the movie theater. You knew that nothing truly affects you. That discovery of the perfection of the untainted, unaffected nature of Atma, our true internal self, is what then can allow you to experience physical and emotional pain without suffering that actually accompanies it. So basically he was saying you go to a movie and say you're in a tearjerker, or it causes you to get emotional and you're crying, so that's movie theater sadness. It can draw these emotions out of you, but basically in reality, you'll know that when you come, that in the movie theater you knew that nothing truly should affect you because it's really just a movie, it's not true. It just drew you to have those emotions. So as you become more and more conscious of your self-realization that your Atman is Brahman, it's not your physical body, then you'll be able to control more and more of your emotions, and you go through suffering. It'll have less and less of an effect on you, and eventually you'll recover a whole lot quicker than most people because of that. So I think that ties in with this feeling of outrage. If you basically know that, well, dying just kills your physical body, doesn't destroy your Atman or eternal self, because, as it says, that's eternal. And that's what Krishna basically tells Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. When he's struggling, having to go fight his cousins, he basically says, well, if you kill them, you're a Kshatriya, Arjuna. That's your dharma or duty, to be a warrior. So go fight. And even if you kill your cousins, you're just killing the body. You're not destroying the true self or the Atman. So there's nothing really you should get upset about the grief and pain and suffering that's being unfolded. And so I guess the document commentary by Ramanuja says that this ingression into bodies of our eternal Atman produces a delusion of identity with those respective bodies. So then again, the more we become self-realized, we should understand that the main thing we should be focused on is the Atman inside us, but we're deluded that our identity is also wrapped up in this physical body, which really is going to die anyway. And so the people that were part of these tragedies are only getting what they karmically deserved, and it's just part of the automatic system of divine justice. And ultimately, they, and really you and me and everybody else are just actors in the divine play or Leela of Brahman, who is the ultimate reality. So Leela is accurately describes a notion within yogic philosophy that the whole world is a spontaneous creation of Brahman. He's the ultimate. So it is sportive and playful as opposed to self-conscious or volitional in intention. Leela emphasizes the fact that the world is born in freedom and playful creativity rather than necessity. So in this way, the whole world can be seen as a stage for this Leela, or this divine play is what it means. So this is key. It is an illusion to see the actions on the stage as real. So what we're going through, experiencing in our lifetimes, and those who see them in this way are said to be under the spell of Maya, or illusion. So really, in the end, we shouldn't blame the terrorists, say, who flew the planes into the Twin Towers, because they were just helping us to fulfill our negative karma, as well as everybody else who died in that tragedy. This collective karma was being brought to fructification or fulfilled. So let's finally go back and look at the case study. So I think what we've looked at so far, we can answer a couple questions about, well, what was Mary's told, and did people have the right understanding about karma? I think we can say that Mary's co-worker, who told her that her car accident was a result of karma, yeah, she appeared to have the correct definition. And it was not wrong of her to tell Mary the car accident was due to bad karma. Mary's friends were well-intentioned, but are really making up their own definition of karma and actually telling Mary something that is not true. So as we've seen, karma can be a result of past actions, so Mary would not remember the bad karma that caused her car accident. It brings up a question: if you can't remember your past actions, how can you learn from them and not make the same mistake in your current reincarnation? So one of Mary's friends tells her that truth is what's in your heart. So based on that, truth is subjective and can seem to override the scientific, eternal, immutable, unchangeable, natural law of karma. I think those who believe it, and as we've seen in this presentation, wouldn't agree with that. So this has been very like an informal investigation on my part. Most of the resources you can get yourself and do the same thing, but I think you'll come to the same conclusion that I came to, that there's a wide understanding, interpretation of actually how karma works and how your first life works. But according to Swami Tadamananda, there's no first birth. You've had infinite births, but how does all that work? Thanks for listening, and I'll be posting other videos in the future.